Hey, Mike.
Oh, hey, Randy. How's the project going?
We're making some great progress on your t-shirt store. We've added some PHP to make our HTML files easier to maintain. As you know, today we're going to use some advanced functionality with PHP. Forms.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn about the forms. You know, I've been reading some Plato to get ready.
Wait, what are you reading?
You know, Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher? He had this whole theory about forms like beauty, justice, goodness. I learned about him on Wikipedia.
Mike, those aren't the forms you're looking for. We're going to talk about web forms. I'll be walking through how to build out a contact form for your t-shirt store. We'll be building off the code we finished last time. If you don't still have that handy, you can download my copy of it from the previous video. I'll be introducing some new HTML elements for input fields and buttons. I included the CSS to style them back when we started the project. Start up your local web server again and open your browser to the root of it. Navigate to the contact page. Next, open up your text editor to your htdocs directory and open up the contact.php file. We'll be spending some good quality time with this PHP file as we build out our contact form. Let's start off by adding some of the HTML I've defined for our page structure, wrapping the page content in a div with the class of wrapper. After the heading, let's add a paragraph with a short welcome note. Now let's create the fields into which a site visitor can enter some information. We'll start by adding a simple text field, an input element with a type attribute set to text. Let's save the page and take a look at it in the browser. There's now a text field on the page. A site visitor could now type in a value here. Input fields like this belong inside an HTML form element. This is a container element that allows the values from these input fields to be sent to the server when the form is submitted. There are a couple of different methods the browser can use to send data to the server. We'll discuss them a bit more later on, but for this form, we'll set the method attribute to post. We can have multiple fields in a single form. Each field will need a name attribute so that the server can tell them apart. We'll want the person filling out the form to enter their name here, so we'll give this first field a name attribute of name. A site visitor won't be able to see this name attribute, so they won't know what value to type in the field unless we tell them. There's an HTML element for this called label. The label element has a cool attribute that lets you relate the label to a specific input field. Your input field needs an ID attribute for this to work, so let's add an ID of name to our input field. We can now set an attribute called for on the label. Give it the same value as the ID on the input field, name, and the browser will know that this label goes with that input field. Relating these two elements together is important for accessibility. Screen readers convert text on the page to speech, typically for blind users. Without a clear relationship between a label and an input field, it is difficult for someone using a screen reader to know what to put in a particular input field. Even in a visual browser, you can see a nice usability improvement if these two fields are related. If you click on a label, the browser will act as if you'd clicked on the input field. With this input box, for example, clicking on the label places the cursor directly in the related input field. Let's add a few more fields to our form. For forms with multiple fields, it's fairly common to use an HTML table element. You may have heard something about not using tables in your HTML. The key is not to use tables for layout. If you have a 3-column layout, for example, don't use an HTML table for that. But if you do have tabular data, then a table element is perfectly acceptable. For each form field, we'll add a row to the table. Each row will have 2 columns, one column for the label and one column for the field. The cell with the label acts as a heading for the cell with the field. We'll use the table header cell element, TH, for the label, and we'll use table data cell, TD, element for the cell with the field. To add additional fields to the form, we can add an additional row to this table. This will be a field where the site visitor can enter their email address. Let's change the name and the ID attributes to email. And let's change the label. Let's change the for attribute on the label to match. And change the text that the user sees. Let's paste another row here. This field will be for the message. This input element allows for only one line of text. It's ideal for fields like name and email address, but it won't work for this field like a message. There's a separate HTML element for that, the text area element. The text area element has an opening and a closing tag. If you wanted some text to appear inside the text area by default, you would put it here in between the opening and closing tag. Change the name and the ID attributes of this text area to message. Next, we'll add a button down here below the table. A submit button is another type of input element, this time with a type of submit. You can also specify what text appears on the button by specifying a value attribute. Let's use send. We now have a nice form in place. Visitors to our site can enter information into the form fields and click Send to submit the form to our server.